Good morning, dear students. In the last class, we started up with a new chapter, that is planning, whereas we discussed about the meaning of planning as well as the features and also the importance of planning. In today's class, we will discuss the limitations of planning. Limitations are nothing but the disadvantages of planning. Now we will discuss in detail. The first important limitation here is planning leads to rigidity. Rigidity is nothing but the flexible. The opposite of rigidity is nothing but flexible. Rigidity is nothing where the manager, where he plans what has to be done before itself, so it cannot be changed in future. So they cannot change the whatever plans they have done in before, they cannot be changed in future. So it is rigid, it is not flexible, whereas the managers will not be flexible to change the plans which they have done, whereas it is rigid because it is planned in the starting itself. So as per the plan, it has to go. So it is known as rigid. So second one here is planning may not work in dynamic environment. So as I am discussing you all this topic from the first chapter itself, dynamic environment is nothing but change in the environment. In case we cannot predict what happens tomorrow. So in that period of time, it may not work in the dynamic environment. Whatever plan is done before, in case if any changes happens in the environment like social, political, economic or technological, then through the dynamic changes, so the planning will not go in a smooth manner. So it does not work in the dynamic environment. Okay. The third important limitation here is it reduces creativity. Likewise, the planning will be done by the top level management in the organization. So it is done only by the top level management in the organization, where the subordinates and the lower and the middle level management has to follow that. So the creativity of the lower level and the middle level will not get a chance to do some planning over there. Where what the top level management will plan will be in the process. So it reduces the creativity. We cannot take the decisions of the middle level as well as the lower level management, whereas the subordinates should instruct and follow the whatever planning process which they have given by the top level management. So it reduces the creativity. So next one here is it involves huge cost. So why it involves huge cost here is they have to arrange for meetings, they have to take professional expert professionals advices. Okay, so it involves huge cost, whereas the process is long for the planning. Whatever plan it has been done, they have to think of the previous thing, what all has been done. So through that planning, they have to go for the process. So it involves huge cost, whereas they have to arrange for the meetings, like I told you all, and also to take the professional expert professionals advices for the organization. So it involves huge cost. So next one is time consuming. Planning is a time consuming. So time consumes a lot, whereas they need to plan. So it takes lot of time to sketch the plan, whereas they have to prepare the alternative plans also because they cannot go with the one process itself. So they need to take the alternative plans and also the advices from the expert. So it is the time consuming. So next one here is planning does not give guarantee for success. Why? Because planning does not give guarantee for success is whatever they have planned now, it is for the future. For futuristic, they think the assumption is only of the futuristic. So we cannot predict what happens tomorrow, then how can they predict for the guarantee for the success? So with the previous plan, they can take the plans and they can do. So guarantee for success is not there. Okay, now we will discuss the another topic, that is nothing but the planning process. Okay, now as we discussed about the limitations of planning, now we are moving on to the next topic, that is planning process. That is nothing but steps in planning, whereas it is important as for your practical oriented question. Okay, whereas you all need to write the 7 points in the practical oriented questions. Let me now explain you all one by one. So planning process. So planning process is nothing but the process which is done before the object to set, isn't it? So whatever plan should be done in the starting stage itself, whereas what to do, who has to do and how to do and what are the main purpose or the object of the organization should be planned in the starting itself, as I have explained you all in the meaning. Now we will know the planning process. So first one here is setting object, okay, objective. Second one is developing premises. third one is identifying alternative course of action, and the fourth one is evaluating alternative course, fifth one selecting an alternative, and the sixth one implementing the plan, and the seventh one is follow up action. Now we will discuss one by one in detail what you mean by setting objective, plan, developing premises and identifying alternative course of action in detail. So now we will discuss in detail about the planning process, and the first one here is setting objective. Setting objective is nothing but the setting of goal or purpose, for the what purpose the organization has been opened. So you have to set some objective in that. So the first here is, it is a first function of planning process, okay, the process in planning. So the first function of planning process, and the objectives are of objective are the goals specify what the organization want to achieve. So they have to specify what actually the organization has to achieve. So that should be specified. So that is nothing but setting the objective. What is the main purpose of organization to open? They need to set in the planning process, and it must be specific, realistic and measurable. So it should be very much specific and easy, so that the employees also should understand the plan what has been done. So it should be specific, realistic and also measurable. And next is, for example, increase in sales by 20% for the coming year. So that is nothing but the setting objective. So in case the organization want to achieve something, so that is setting an objective. The increase for the next year they wanted to increase 20% of their sales for the coming year. So that is an objective which they are going to set. So it should be easy, so that the employees also should understand what actually the main purpose of the organization. I repeat again, so setting an objective is nothing but the purpose or the goal of an organization for what the organization has been opened. That should be specific. Okay, it is the first and the foremost planning process in the organization, and also planning process, and also the objectives of the goal should be specific. Okay, specify what the organization want to achieve. So what actually they want to achieve should be specified in that. Then it must be specific, realistic and measurable. As I told you, it should be easy, so that the employees also should understand. It should be a specific and realistic is nothing but reality, what the reality is happening all around. So it should be realistic, and also it should be measurable. Example, as I told you all, increase in sales by 20% for the coming year. So that is the setting of object as an example. So if they want to achieve something for the futuristic plan, as well as I told you, planning is fully of futuristic. So they have to think, they have to know what actually the organization has to go, so that it is increase in sales of 20% for the coming year is an setting of objective. So next, and the next planning process here is developing premises. Developing premises nothing but planning is concerned with the future. As I told you, planning is completely concerned with the future. So future is uncertain. We cannot predict what happens tomorrow, isn't it? So it is uncertain, whereas planning is completely full of the planning is formulated by certain assumptions. Therefore it is formulated only by assumption. Through assumptions planning is being done. So what are the assumptions they do here is assumptions in change of population, okay, change in the government, change in the market condition, rules and regulations of the government, etc. So these are the assumptions they keep in their mind and develop the premises. So assumption of change in the population, change in the government, how government changes, then change in the market condition, they have to check on to the market condition also, and rules and regulations of the government. And next is, so it should be formulated within the frame of planning premises. So it should be formulated with the premises of the planning process. So this is the second process, that is developing premises. That is nothing but planning is concerned with future, which is uncertain. It is completely full of futuristic. So it is uncertain. We cannot predict what happens tomorrow. Through assumptions they do the planning. So likewise assumptions like change in the population, okay, then the change in the government, change in the market condition, we cannot predict what market condition happens, then rules and regulations of the government. So they should formulate within the frame of work in the planning premises. Now we will move on to the third main planning process, that is nothing but identification of alternative course of action. Once the objective are set, once the developing premises or assumptions are made, so the next process here is identification of alternative course of action. See, in planning we cannot go through one plan itself. Whatever plan one, we cannot put only one plan, whereas they should find an alternative way of action. See, ultimately the customer should satisfy. Ultimately the management or the organization which they are running should satisfy the customer through their wants. So we need to identify the alternative course of action here, so that it is easy for the planning process also. So if you have some alternative in that, so it will be easy for the organization to run smoothly. So the first here is, there may be many ways to achieve the objective. Okay, there may be many ways to achieve the objective, but they should find a particular process alternative action, so that it will be easy for the organization and also to satisfy the customer. Next, management should know all the alternative here. So management should know all the alternative way where they can satisfy the customer and what actually they want, what is the purpose of the organization, that should be planned here. So here again I repeat, identification of alternative course of action is nothing but once the objectives are set, once the assumptions are made, so next comes the identification of alternative course of action, whereas they should find then each and every alternative way, whereas ultimately the planning process is completely to satisfy the organization as well as the customer outside. So they should find an alternative way. If they are going to manufacture a product, they should know an alternative way to sell the product. Once the product is launched in the market, immediately the customer won't buy the product. So they should find an alternative way so that the customer should feel to buy the product. So they should have some alternative way. So that is nothing but identification. They should identify many alternative ways in planning process itself, so that they can achieve the organizational goals easily. So next one here is, fourth one is evaluating alternative course. Once the identification of alternative course is done, they should evaluate, analyze the what happens. There will be always a negative and the positive way aspect in each and everything. So if the alternative way is negative or positive, that should be analyzed here. So analysis of the strength and weaknesses of every alternative. Whatever the alternative they have done, they should analyze the strength and the weaknesses. What are the strength of that, whereas in each and everything there will be advantage as well as the disadvantage. Likewise, the strength and the weaknesses of every alternative should be evaluated, whereas all alternative have their own merits and demerits. As I told you all, each and every alternative, as if the product is launched in the market, if it has to go to the customer directly, whereas it is also have the merits as well as the demerits. So you should see whether it is okay for the organization, the alternative is okay, meritable or demeritable. Next is, for example, in a financial plan, risk return, more risky the investment, higher the return, is an example for evaluating alternative course of action. So next one here is selecting an alternative. Once the identification of alternative is done, evaluating it done, and the next process here is selecting an alternative. You need to select an alternative. That is nothing but the idea's course of action must be feasible, profitable, within minimum negative consequences, whereas the negativity should be low, whereas it should be feasible and profitable. The main purpose of each and every organization is to achieve the organizational goals and to earn profit, isn't it? So likewise, the selecting of alternatives should be good, so that the organization should run smoothly, where the customer also should satisfy. Ultimately, the product which we produce is directly going to the customer itself. So the customer should satisfy, so that the planning process only should be done properly. So identifying the alternative is very much important in the organization. They should have some many alternative, because we cannot predict what happens tomorrow. So we need to have some alternative, whereas we have to evaluate the alternative also and then go for the selection of alternative. Once the alternative is okay, if it is less of negativity and more profitable, if it is okay for the organization, that they have that confidence, so that it will achieve the organizational goals, then the process is selecting an alternative comes. So now the selection of alternative is done, and the next process here is implementing the plan. That is nothing but putting into action. Okay, putting into action is nothing but implementing the plan. Once the alternative has been selected, so now we need to implement the plan in the organization. It requires to formulate the policies. Okay, it also requires to formulate the policies, procedures, how procedures they are going to do, what are the policies, budget, okay, programs, delegation of authority and responsibility, okay, next cooperation, next participation and commitment. of subordinates for efficient implement of plan. So once the plan has been implemented, they should formulate each and everything. Likewise, the plan should go in a processed manner how they have planned. Likewise, to formulate the policies should be formulated, procedures, okay, budget should be planned in before itself, as well as the authority and responsibility. Okay, next, cooperation should be there with the employees, whereas the whatever plan they are going to do should be easy, and so that the employees should understand the plan what they have done. Then the participation and commitment of subordinates. Commitment is very much important of subordinates for efficient implementation of plan. So next process here is follow up action. Next is after the implementing the plan, we need to see whether the whatever has planned is been in the processed manner. That is nothing but monitoring the plan. We need to check on the plan whether it is going in a smooth manner as they have planned, okay, to see whether the plans are being implemented and activities are performed as per the plan. Okay, this is very much important. That is nothing but evaluating or seeing, follow up the plan is nothing but you need to check out whether the plan what has been planned should be followed up by the people or the organization, so that the organization is going in a smooth manner according to their plan. So it is very much important as per your practical oriented question, whereas you have 7 points, that is nothing but planning process. You may call it as steps in planning also. The first one here is setting objective. The second one here is we studied about the developing premises. Third one is identification, alternative course of action, and the fourth one is evaluating alternative course, and the fifth one is selecting an alternative, and the sixth one here is implementing the plan, and the seventh one is follow up action. So as in today's class, we discussed about the limitations of planning as well as the planning process. So these are the 2 assignment questions which I am going to give you all today. First one is explain the limitations of planning, whereas it carries 4 marks. Okay. Next is, this is a practical oriented question. As a manager, what logical steps you follow in planning process before executing a project? This is a practical oriented question. Please make a note of it, whereas you will need to write only the 7 steps which is involved in that. So in the next class we will learn the other topics. Thank you. Have a nice day.